During the last show, we started the mental health disorder conversation by looking at disorders in the anxiety, the mood, psychotic, eating, impulse and addiction control, personality, and post traumatic stress categories. This week, we're going to be continuing to define some of the more common disorders as we continue to prepare the way for our solutions based discussions that are going to be had later on. So, in this episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will continue our look at psychological disorders.
Lessons from the Screen is back, presenting these facts with a little opinion laid on top of that. And in August on the Freedom Train Network, we talking mental health because it needs work. Everybody ready to move whenever their body hurt, but when their mind is broken, they don't even drink. I guess it's crazy to make sure that you're not, and that's why we talking about this here right now. And
welcome to Lessons from the Screen, the show where we give you a review of whether or not any particular information that you can get from any particular screen of any particular kind is worth your time. We waste our time, our energy, and our brain power so that you don't have to. And Lessons from the Screen is sponsored by PAX Inc., a Black activist, advocacy, and think tank with the purpose of increasing the quality of life for Black people in America through education, economics, and a culture shift. You can check them out at www.pactsinc.org. That's paxinc.org. Take a survey, share it, word of mouth. Leave a donation, become a member, volunteer, do whatever you can to help them out because they're doing whatever they can to help you out. And as I said earlier, in this show, we're going to continue our look at psychological disorders. The last show, we looked at some of the more common ones, the ones that are more well known. This show, we're going to look at some of the ones that are a little less well known, not to say that they're less common, just that they might be a little less well known. And as always, my little disclaimer up front, I am not a licensed psychologist, so I am not diagnosing you. I am just telling you what these things are. If you feel that you might have some psychological issues, you need to go and seek a mental health professional. So we're going to open the door here. We ended last week with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this week we're going to open up with stress response syndrome. Now, this used to be called adjustment disorders, but a stress response syndrome or stress response syndromes occur when a person develops emotional or behavioral symptoms in response to a stressful event or situation. This stressor may include natural disasters or events or other crises, car accidents, diagnosis of major illness, interpersonal problems, divorce, loss of a loved one, loss of a job, substance abuse, any number of things that create elevated stress levels or major life-altering events. Now, stress responses differ from PTSD in that the stress response is usually milder, is not as severe as a PTSD response. And it also tends to be a short durational type thing. So whereas, it would usually begin within 3 months of the event or the situation, and it usually ends within 6 months after whatever was causing the issue stops or is eliminated. So it's a milder form of PTSD. Well, we don't even want to associate the two because they're not associated, but it is a milder stress response that is temporary in nature. Now, this is something that we all deal with when we talk about stress because we all undergo stress. You know what I'm saying? Pookie and them, they was out there doing them things and they ain't come home till late or whatever the case might be. You stressed out. That's not exactly the same thing. We have our normal stress responses, our normal things that happen that are within this spectrum of what's identified as normal activity. And then you have elevated responses, and these, especially if they're continuously elevated, can lead to some serious issues. And these are the things that usually become, especially if they're specifically related to an event, and can be eliminated by the resolving of that event or that situation. But these are the things that become adjustment disorders. You're failing to adjust to a new situation, a new way of life, a new way of being, and it's interfering with your daily habits. It's interfering with your ability to be a normal, functioning, balanced human being. And I'm gonna be honest. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. We gonna move on. Before I say I do something stupid, we gonna move on. Now, then you have your dissociative disorders, and people with these disorders suffer from severe disturbances or changes in memory, consciousness, identity, and general awareness of themselves and their surroundings. Now, these disorders usually are associated with overwhelming stress, which may be the result of traumatic events, accidents, or disasters that may be experienced or witnessed by the individual. Dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder or split personality, and depersonalization disorder are examples of dissociative disorders. Now, for those of you who may want that broken down a little bit more, basically, these are people who suffer from instances where their behavioral function, their behavior, and their cognitive functions become so disturbed and so distressed that they appear to be a completely different or unique individual, personality, character, living within the same body, the same mind. So someone goes through something and it's so traumatizing, it's so traumatic. It causes such a high level of distress and overwhelming stress that there's almost a fracture that happens, and they begin to experience things that can only be qualified as a change in who they are. Now, that change can last a long period of time, or it can be brief. And they could be multiple changes, as in multiple personality disorder, or they could be, not so, only a single change, and so we get into this area where it could be multiple things. But I do want to point out that the vast majority of these psychological issues, not the vast majority, but a good chunk of these psychological issues that we are looking at are either brought on or made worse by stress. And that's something that I want to harp on at this point, because we in the Black community, we experience a lot of stress. All people experience a lot of stress, but we have the added stress of having to deal with racism and oppression and several other things, in addition to the additional stress we put on ourselves to overcome, to fit in, to strive, to compete, to be twice as good for 50% as much. All of those stresses that we put on ourselves and on our kids, we don't think about the long-term impact of that. There is no safe zone, no place where we can just unwind and relax. And that's why we're always mad at people when they interfere with our fun. But we have to take certain steps to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves psychologically, that we're doing what we need to do for our mental states so that we can be healthy individuals and we can deal with the problems that we face, in addition to the other problems that are layered on top of those. And with that being said, I ain't mad at y'all for wanting to go see, Beyonce, or wanting to watch your Hour of Power, or wanting to watch Empire or Scandal or all that other stuff. Look, do you, boo-boo. I don't care. Long as you recognize that when it's time to get busy, it's time to get busy. But I do recognize that doing all of those things for a lot of people are escapes. And I'm not going to attack anyone for escaping, because we all need to relieve stress and we all need to escape from time to time. But if you want our mental situation to get better, if you want your kids not to have to deal with the stresses that could cause some of these psychological issues, some of these mental dysfunctions, then at some point you got to come back to reality and get the work done. And that's all I'm going to say about that. You heard? I did it. So next we have fictitious disorders. Now, fictitious disorders are conditions in which a person knowingly and intentionally creates or complains of physical and or emotional symptoms in order to place the individual in the role of a patient or a person in need of help. So basically, these are people that lie in order to be viewed as a victim. Now, this is a psychological disorder that people can get treatment for, probably should get treatment for. For me, this one is strange. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but we all know people that lie to be placed in that realm of victimhood of somebody that needs help, of a patient. Are all of them suffering from some sort of mental disorder? I would agree that they're all not mentally healthy. But I don't know. I go back to this when we talked about psychotic disorders last show. Are we living in a society that educates, encourages, and inculcates that sort of behavior into people? Is that something that's built into the culture, into the genetic structure of our society, to where it is advantageous to gain advantage wherever you can, even if it causes disadvantage or harm for other people, in the case of what this disorder would do? And I'm sure a psychologist would say, well, we aren't talking about somebody that merely lies. We're talking about something that has a real psychological issue where they can't help but do what they do. To some extent, one would say that a liar can't help it either. That's why they're doing it. So again, and this is where I get into that area of, I'm not a trained psychologist. I've taken a slew psychological courses. And the only thing keeping me from my certifications, as the highest certification that I could get, is finance. That being said, I'm still not licensed. So, I still got to put that caveat out there. But this is one that, along with a couple of the other ones that I've been reading about over the years, there are some of those that are real head scratchers, and this is one where it's like, do we really need a disorder for this? But apparently, it is a disorder, and we see people with it all. We see people showing symptoms of it all the time. So the question then becomes, if it is a legit disorder, how many people are really walking around with this disorder? Now, sexual and gender disorders used to be fairly unknown and uncommon back in the day, and they've increased in prevalence now. Although their rates might be similar to what they were back in the day, they are definitely a lot more well known nowadays than they were even a decade ago. And these include disorders that affect sexual desire, performance, and behavior, sexual dysfunction, gender identity disorder, uh, things of that nature are what we're talking about when we're talking about sexual and gender disorders. So it's not just, gender identity disorder or things of that nature, but it also could be ED. Yeah, if it's psychologically based, because that would affect performance. So we're also talking about psychological issues that affect your libido, your drive for sex. So, and in that case, we're not talking about you just tired from work. We're talking about other sexual issues that you might have on the deeper level that are affecting your ability or your desire to have sex or to perform. So this is one that I don't even feel like we got to harp on, because I feel like every adult is familiar with sexual and gender disorders. Now, whether or not we actually going to get treatment for those disorders when we have them, especially the performance related ones, and especially women. Let me say that, because I do think men, if they aren't performing, they might be very discreet and secretive and want you to be hush hush about it, but they will go get treatment. Women don't have that sort of sexual confidence or freedom, or I'm not sure the right word to put on it, and I'm not a woman, but when women, and this is from my personal experience, when women have performance issues or they have low libido or whatever, it's almost like it's just chalked up to being a woman. I know there's a growing surge of women now that are openly expressive of their sexuality, and they have no problems declaring whatever they need to declare. But that doesn't change the fact that there's still a fairly large group of women that don't have that mind state, that still struggle with their sexuality, that still view their own sexuality as being something that they're uncomfortable with or unfamiliar with, and that feel uncomfortable exploring. that subject. So that could be creating other issues. And that's what we get back to, once again. Are we as a society creating these disorders or making them worse? So then we get into somatic symptom disorders. Now, a person with a somatic symptom disorder, and this used to be called a psychosomatic disorder, experiences physical symptoms of an illness or pain with an excessive or disproportionate level of distress, regardless of whether or not a doctor can find a medical cause for the symptoms. Now, basically, what that boils down to is a person is experiencing pain and other symptoms of a disease without a doctor being able to find any biological causes for those symptoms. So it's almost purely psychological. And even if they can find a cause for those symptoms, the symptoms themselves should not be creating the amount of pain or the level of distress that the person is experiencing in that moment. So we've all heard of those people who are, we call them soft, we call them weak in the community. Maybe they do have some sort of somatic disorder going on. Maybe they do need to go and see a psychologist instead of us calling them soft or weak. And, or maybe they are soft and weak. Who knows? But, this ain't somebody that like, oh, I stubbed my pig toe. This ain't that. This is, oh my God, I stubbed my big toe. Oh, my foot is going to fall off. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then they go to the doctor 30 minutes later and they're still, oh, it hurts so bad. Oh. And then, 3 days later, Molly Percocet, Molly Percocet. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But that's what we're talking about here. Well, we are definitely not talking about Molly Percocet because, you know that Black people don't get the good drugs from doctors, and that's proven. That's why racism has protected us from the opioid epidemic, from the legal opioid epidemic. Anyway, it didn't protect us from heroin. Anyways, moving on. And finally, we're going to come down to tic disorders. Now, people with tic disorders make sounds or display non-purposeful body movements that are repeated, quick and sudden, and or uncontrollable. The sounds that are made involuntarily are called vocal tics. And Tourette syndrome is an example of a tic disorder. Now, a lot of people think they have tics, but they don't. These are disorders where people are literally doing things without their control, and they do them often. This is not, well, every time I scratch my back, I gotta do 10 jumping jacks. This ain't that. You know what I'm saying? This is something where these people literally don't have full control over their bodies in these instances, and these things are just done, and they can't stop it. Being the key thing there, they can't stop it. So, and a lot of people with, like, you think about Tourette syndrome, a lot of people with Tourette's also have something else going on. But I know a lot of people like to minimize a lot of these disorders by saying that, well, I do this, I'm OCD. No, you're not OCD. You just like things neat and orderly. There's a difference. When people say I got a tic, I got a disorder. No, you don't have a disorder. You just like to do that. But when you need to not do that, I've seen you go hours and hours and hours without doing that. So that's what we're talking about in these situations. And I do think it's kind of sad that we minimize the impact of these disorders on the people that actually have them by claiming that we have some sort of minimized, cute, stylized version of it. Because then when somebody that really has the issue comes around, people don't give them the proper respect or the necessary care that they need. So we got to be careful about how the little things that we do impact the larger structures, the larger institutions, and how people are treated as they interact with those institutions. Now, again, this isn't an all comprehensive list of psychological disorders and things of that nature, but I just wanted to go over some of the more common ones, some of the more popular ones. There are various others, in sleep related issues, dementia, you know, various other issues that are classified as mental disorders, even though they have a biological cause. They're still considered mental illnesses because they happen in the brain. So, that's when you get it's talking about brain bacteria, prions, and all this other stuff. So, anyways, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Lessons from the Screen. Like with the last episode and like with every episode we've had this week, we hope you learn, or we've had this month. We hope you learned something. We hope that you take this information, you look it up, you discuss it. What I'm looking at came directly from WebMD. Also hope that you will go to the Freedom Train website and interact with what we have on the homepage there. We got a lot of stories and a lot of conversation last year. We're not getting a whole lot of that this year. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. There's more y'all out there listening this year than last year, so we should be getting a whole bunch more, but for some reason that's not translating. But anyways, I want to thank you guys. As always, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. Want you guys to take this seriously so we can reduce the stigma and really begin to make powerful changes in recognizing mental health issues in our community so that we can get them fixed. We love you, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Lessons from the Screen.
Lessons from the Screen is back, presenting these facts with a little opinion laid on top of that. And in August on the Freedom Train Network, we talking mental health because it needs work. Everybody ready to move whenever their body hurt, but when their mind is broken, they don't even drink. I guess it's crazy to make sure that you're not, and that's why we talking about this here right now. And
once again, I want to thank you for tuning in to Lessons from the Screen. Lessons from the Screen is brought to you by PAX Inc. through the Freedom Train Network. You can find us on www.freedomtrainradio.com or on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Stitcher. Be sure to head to one of those places and leave us a review, and then be sure to head back to the website to let us know what you think about the show and communicate with us. Also, be sure to head to www.paxinc.org and show some love and support for our sponsors. PAX Inc. is doing big things in the community and trying to do more, always trying to do more. So be sure to head to the website. That's www.pactsinc.org. Donate, volunteer, become a member, talk about it, whatever. They can use your support, and once again, they are doing great things in the community. And as always, Lessons from the Screen has a frame of reference and perspective that is aligned with that of the Black community. The things that we look at, whether it be on the Trending Tuesday or the regular Lessons from the Screen show, will always be looked at from the Black perspective. So keep that in mind, because we need more minds shaped into that perspective and trying to do things that we need done for ourselves. So with that in mind, again, thank you guys for listening in. Remember to tune into the Freedom Train Radio. We have the app that's available that you can get from the website. It's in the Google Play Store. Sorry, it's not available on iTunes yet. We have the live internet radio, and we have more shows coming up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you guys for the next episode of Lessons from the Screen.